Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another photography class. Today we're going to talk a little bit about focal length. So focal length is your field of view. It's side to side, up and down, what gets into your shot. Okay? You often hear it referred to as zoom, how much zoom is on a camera. Focal length is just a way of measuring that. So for example, this lens that I have on my camera right now is 18 to 250 millimeters. And that's my focal length range, 18 millimeters to 250 millimeters. Okay, so 18 is my wide angle and 250 is my telephoto. Okay, with me so far? Let's go back to wide angle. Again, using this lens as an example, this is 18 millimeters. That's a pretty wide angle. You can get wider. The wider you go, the more you're going to fit into your image from side to side. Your field of view is going to be nice and wide. The problem with a really wide angle is that it does cause a little bit of distortion. So particularly if you're taking pictures of people, you're not going to want to use a wide angle lens. If you've heard of the term fisheye effect, that's when you get that really bubbled out look, and that's with an extremely wide angle lens. Wide focal lengths like this are really good for scenery, for example, because you can fit a lot in one shot. If you really want to emphasize, for example, the height of a building, you can get really close to that building and use a wide angle lens, and it's going to really exaggerate that height, okay? But again, not so good for pictures of people. So standard focal lengths, let's just use 50 millimeters as an example of a standard focal length, because a 50 millimeter lens is typically advertised as a portrait lens. And the reason is because it's close to what your eyes see without any distortion. It's a lot more flattering if you're taking pictures of people. And a lot of times now you'll see phones that have a portrait lens on them, and that's why it's a lot more flattering. So even though with a wide angle lens, you can walk up really close to someone and you're going to get them close up, but it's not going to be very flattering. Whereas a standard focal length, it is going to bring you in closer, and even you might find yourself taking a step backwards because your subject is all of a sudden a little too close. But it's going to be a lot less bubbled out. Even if you don't really notice it, trust me on this one, it's going to be a lot more flattering. So third is telephoto. Again, using this lens as an example, my most telephoto focal length on here is 250 millimeters. That's what a lot of people refer to as zoom. How much zoom does it have? Not technically correct, but we're going to let it slide for today. So telephoto is going to take everything that's far away from you and bring it in closer, but you're narrowing your field of view. So you're not going to be able to get the entire scene just closer. Obviously, you're going to be cropping in on one certain section of it and bringing that closer. So let's get into a little bit of the secondary effect of focal length, and that is perspective. Your focal length changes your perspective. So let's keep using 18 millimeters as our example for a wide focal length. If I'm using this lens and I'm at 18 millimeters and I'm taking a picture of several objects, the apparent space between them is going to seem really far apart. Opposite to that, if I use the same lens and I zoom out to 250 millimeters, first of all, in order to get the same object in the frame, I'm going to have to stand way, way back. But if I do that, it's still going to look really different. It makes the space between the objects appear much, much smaller. It stacks things closer. A lot of people really like telephoto lenses for portraits because they have that sort of stacking effect when it comes to the background as well. So for example, right now, those trees behind me look kind of far away, but that's just because this lens is pretty wide angle. If I was to get someone to take my picture standing a little bit farther away and using this lens zoomed out to 250, that background would all of a sudden kind of smush closer to me. You wouldn't see as many of the trees, and also, bonus, it would blur too. Remember when I said aperture was how you blur backgrounds? I'm really sorry to do this to you, but there's two ways, and telephoto lens is the other one. So that's why you sometimes see photographers using, for example, a 70 to 200 millimeter lens to take portraits. It's a little more flattering for the person's face, but also it stacks the background and it makes it a little bit blurry, which is just really nice. It's not busy and distracting like that would be. Obviously, the other benefit to having a telephoto lens is you're bringing things closer to you. So for things like animals or birds. If you're trying to take close-up shots of them, you're going to need a lens that has a little bit of a telephoto. Okay, so to summarize, a wide angle is a small number of millimeters. So 10 or 12 or 18 millimeters is a pretty wide angle. The big numbers are going to be more telephoto. So like 250 millimeters or 300 millimeters or 600 millimeters. Those are going to be your telephoto options. They're going to bring everything a lot closer to you. They're not going to get as much in the frame. And again, the wider angles do tend to distort things a little bit by making them appear a little bit fisheye or even increasing the apparent space between them, whereas a telephoto is going to do the opposite and stack things together.
You can do a really easy experiment to see this effect for yourself. All you're going to need is a few different household items. I used plants. You can use anything. Place them on something where you've got a bit of space. I used my countertop and put them so they're about 8 or 10 inches apart. Now set your camera or your phone to the widest angle that you have available. For this image, I used 18 millimeters. You're going to want to take a picture that includes all of your items in one frame. Now switch to your most telephoto option. So for me, it was my 250 millimeters on my lens. And get the same items in the frame. And I want you to notice the difference. When you compare the two images, especially side by side, you can really see what I mean when I say that a long focal length, so in my case, 250 millimeters, can make objects appear a lot closer together.
I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.